Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I am Sayyid Akif Shah, lecturer finance at Institute of Business Studies, Kohat University of Science and Technology. The title of this course is Principles of Accounting, and the course code for this subject is BS 161. This is our lecture number 20th, and the topic for today's discussion is the first three steps of the accounting cycle, that consist of recording the journal entry in the journal, then posting the relevant information into the specific ledger accounts, and then making a trial balance at step number 3 in the accounting cycle. So in order to elaborate this topic, or the first three steps of the accounting cycle in detail, I have selected a problem from the recommended book to the students as an illustration and as an example to explain the three steps in detail. So let's move towards the outline of our lecture. The outline consists of the discussion or understanding the accounting cycle with the help of an accounting problem or as a numerical case. For this purpose, we have selected a numerical case from the recommended book, and it's problem number 3.5 on page 134. Basically, this problem will address the first three steps of the accounting cycle, which is to journalizing the entries in the journal. The second step is to post the same entries into the ledger accounts. And then the same case will require us to make the trial balance. As I have already explained, the purpose of trial balance is to make sure that we have done the journal entry in the correct fashion, and as well as our second step, which was to make the ledger accounts. And basically this trial balance is the balances or the final balance of the ledger accounts, as we will obtain from data from the previous step. So therefore it will help us and it will make sure that either we have done our journal entries in the correct way or we have done any mistake at any particular stage. As I have already explained, that accounting cycle consists of the series of steps. So therefore the first step, which is to journalize the entries, is very crucial, because we have to take the relevant information from the first step to post those economic events into the second step, that is to make the ledger accounts either in T-shape or in the running balance format. For understanding that, you can listen to my previous lecture on T-shape ledger accounts and as well as the running balance method format. So the important aspect is that we should not commit any mistake while journalizing the entries. Otherwise, our whole accounting cycle process will lead that mistake into the next step and then to the subsequent steps. And finally, we will have the error to be identified in the trial balance, because the trial balance will mismatch. So let's discuss today's numerical case and how to journalize posting those entries and then to make a trial balance in that specific problem. This is basically the complete snapshot of the accounting cycle. We'll start with journalizing the transaction, and then we'll post them into the relevant ledger accounts. And the third step, which will be completed in this lecture shortly, is the trial balance. So basically today's lecture will address the first three steps with the help of a numerical example. Here we have a numerical illustration which will require us to make certain steps to be completed pertinent to the accounting cycle. So let's start reading this illustration and then to understand how to journalize different transactions related with the month of June. So in June 2001, Pat Campbell organized a corporation to provide crop dusting services. So here we have a person named as Pat Campbell who is going to organize or form a business organization as a company form of organization in June 2001 to provide the crop dusting services to the clients. Then the company called Campbell Crop Dusting. The name of the company he has selected is, let me select the pen. The name of the company, the business entity will be the the Campbell Crop Dusting will be the name of the business. And it will begin operation immediately. The moment they have established this corporation, it will start its operation. The transaction during the month of June were as follows. So we have a couple of transactions in the month of June 2001 upon which we are required to make the journal entries. So before studying each transaction, let me take you to the final section of this numerical illustration to first understand what the instructor or what the examiner of this question is expecting the student to understand and to perform. Let's move towards the final section of this numerical illustration. So basically you have to understand that certain chart of account is given at the end of this question. The account title used by the Campbell Crop Dusting Company were as follows. So dear student, whenever a particular chart of account is available at the end of any question, so it will not only assist you to select the relevant account titles for debit and credit entry, but at the other end you have to select, and this question mandates you or require you to opt the relevant titles from the chart of accounts of the company. So here the instructor or the examiner is bounding you to select the relevant titles. Number first. Number second, such kind of account titles assist the student to properly record the debit and credit entry with the specific title. So now it will assist you and it will help you to select the relevant titles which will be available in different economic events as mentioned starting from June 1 to the June 30th. So what are those chart of account? The cash will be used, account receivable will be used, aircraft will be used. Similarly, here we have three assets only: cash, account receivable and aircraft. Beside that, we will have two liabilities named as notes payable, accounts payable, and then we will have the owner's equity section as highlighted as Pat Campbell, and then a comma is mentioned for capital. Then we have a Pat Campbell drawing account, which is also related with the owner equity section. And after that, we will have crop dusting revenue. This title shall be used for recording the revenue transaction. After that, we will have the four different kind of expenses as named with maintenance expense, fuel expense, salaries expense, and the rent expense. So basically, these account titles will be used to record the debit and credit entries in the journal, which we'll see shortly in this lecture. Coming towards the instruction of this question, the instructor's instructions require us to, based on the foregoing transactions as mentioned in the June's transactions, What we have to do in part A, we have to make or we have to record the journal entries. The part B is expecting us to post them into the ledger accounts. The part C is asking us to prepare a trial balance at June 30th, 2001. And the final instruction I will discuss at the end of this lecture or at the end of the completion of part C. So for instance, we can leave the discussion related with part D. Rather, we have to emphasize on our first instruction to make the journal entries. For that purpose, we have to thoroughly understand and carefully read the economic events so that we will be able to select the relevant account title from the chart of account as available at the end of the transactions, and then to record our debit and credit entries according to the gap principle in the journal format. So let's see how to do that. We'll have to go back to the question and then to understand and thoroughly read the first economic event, and then to highlight the relevant account titles available as in this chart of account. Let's discuss the first transaction, which is of June 1st. The Campbell, who is the owner of this business, has deposited $60,000 cash in the bank account in the name of the business. So the Pat Campbell has deposited $60,000 in the bank account of the business, not in his personal account. So whatever the place is, so if the bank account is belonging to that particular business, so it means that the company's cash level has been increased in the bank. And who has deposited this amount? The Campbell has deposited this amount. And who is Pat Campbell? The Pat Campbell will definitely be the owner of this business. So let's move to the chart of account and try to find out the relevant account title for this transaction. For cash, the relevant account title as mentioned is cash. And as we know that cash is our asset, you might remember the diamond rule I have discussed in the previous lectures. When there is increase in an asset, as we knew that cash is our asset, it will record it as a debit entry. And who has deposited this amount? The Pat Campbell has deposited this amount. So therefore, the other account title, as we are following the double entry accounting system, so the second account which has been increased in the name of company is the capital account. So if you do remember the diamond rule, when there is increase in the owner's equity or the equity section of the corporation, it will be recorded as a credit entry. So I expect from the students to listen to my previous lecture on diamond rules for the debit and credit entries in order to have a solid grip on the journalizing the entries in the journal. So let's move ahead and see how to record these entries in the journal in a proper fashion. So dear student, this is our part first, problem 3.5. First of all, you have to mention the company's name at the top, which is named as Campbell Crop Dusting. It is the name of the company. Then you have to mention the journal at the top. After that, you have to sketch the four main columns. The leftmost will be for the date to mention, as the journal is the chronological order or sequence to record the journal entries. So therefore, we have to record the first entry of the June at top and then to follow the subsequent entries in order to follow the chronological order. The second column is related with the account titles and explanation. The third column is for DR. DR is referring to the debit record, and this dollar sign is referring that we are using the monetary principle by following this US dollars. CR represents the credit record, and then it should be the dollar sign must be in the brackets. Then we have to mention the first entry. You have to mention the month name as June, and then you can make a further short column. You have two options, either to divide the date column in this fashion, that is to record the next date into this sub column under the date, or another way you can write down the month name for each subsequent economic event. So the rule states that you have to write down the debit entry first and then to record the credit entry. As we have highlighted that there was increase in the cash level of the company on June 1st because the owner has deposited the amount into the company's bank account. So therefore there was an increase in the cash level, and as we know that cash is our asset and it comes under the umbrella of the asset under the diamond rules. So therefore an increase in asset is recorded as a debit entry. This is the reason that in the journal we have recorded the 60,000 increase in the company's bank account as a debit entry into the debit column. Secondly, we have to mention the credit entry because the double entry accounting system states that for each debit entry we have a corresponding same amounts of credit entry. So for the credit entry we have to slightly indent or to have a little bit space from the debit title, so that if we are not looking at the right hand side of these two columns, still we will be able to understand that the first title is for the debit entry, and this indentation will illustrate that the second title is for the credit entry. So as we have highlighted according to the rule and written down the Pat Campbell Capital, from where we have obtained this title, let's go back and see in the chart of account. The chart of account states that for owner equity, the business usually use the title of Pat Campbell Capital. Therefore, we have used the same title which are available in the chart of account as given or used by the company. And then, as we know that when there is increase in the capital of the company or in the equity section of the company, it will be recorded as credit entry. So hence we have mentioned this entry into the credit column at the rightmost side. Therefore, we have followed the double entry accounting system that each debit entry will have the similar amount of credit entry. Finally, the last step is to mention a shortest narration just beneath the account titles. As we have already mentioned the account titles, the second part is to give a slight explanation or a shortest, precise and concise narration that will explain that what actually has happened in the first June entry. So what's there? We have written owner deposited cash. I have omitted certain things so that I can make you understand with the passage of time while explaining my entries in the journal. So you have to draw the brackets, or you have to insert this short narration into the small brackets so that this narration must not confuse with your above two titles. I have omitted this because I was expecting to write down these brackets with the passage of time. So you have correctly recorded your first June entry. Let's go back to the 2nd of June entry and see that what the examiner is requiring us to do. Let me read out the entry first and then to figure out the relevant account titles in it. June 2nd. Purchased a crop dusting aircraft after depositing $60,000. The company has purchased a crop dusting aircraft from the utility aircraft. So definitely company has purchased an asset named as aircraft. So the level of this asset has been increased in the company. For how much amount? On $220,000 they have purchased it. The company has made $40,000 of cash down payment. Like at the time of purchase from utility aircraft, this crop dusting aircraft, the company has paid $40,000 in cash. So therefore the cash level of the company will decrease by 40,000. And as we know that cash is our asset, so when there is decrease in asset, it will be recorded as a credit entry. Like the cash will be credited with 40,000. However, the crop dusting aircraft, which is our another asset, a tangible asset and a non-current long-term asset, it has been increased with the amount of $220,000. So therefore, this asset named as aircraft will have a debit entry of $220,000. Furthermore, this instruction states that for the remaining amount, company has issued a note payable for $180,000. So notes payable is the company's liability, as payable represents that this note is supposed to be paid out to the utility aircraft company in the future. So therefore our company, which is named as Campbell Crop Dusting Company, its liability with the title of notes payable has been increased. And according to the Diamond rules for the debit and credit, when there is increase in the liability of the company, it will be recorded as a credit entry. So after understanding the second transaction, let's move to the chart of account and select the appropriate title for cash for crop dusting aircraft and as well as for notes payable. So here we have our chart of account. The relevant account title for the notes payable is the same as notes payable, and the company used simply the title of aircraft for its aircraft crop dusting asset. Similarly, for the cash, we use the same title of cash. So let's move to the journal and see how did we do this entry. Once again, either you have to write down in this fashion, or if you are looking to omit the June, so we have to mention in the rightmost column the relevant dates, or otherwise if you are trying to avoid this line, that is further sub column under the date section, then in that case you have to mention the month name each time you are recording the journal entry. So I'll not explain this once again, rather we'll go straight away to the journal entry. Our asset, as we know that we have to record the debit entry first and then the credit entry. You have to mention a single line to divide or to bifurcate the first entry from the second one. And dear student, try to avoid the double line beneath any title and any transaction because the double line in accounting means that the question has closed down. Beside that, I have made certain mistakes or errors so that to make you understand that such kind of happening must not be done by you while you are attempting such question during exam. So you have to clearly sketch a single line beneath the first entry and then to write down the second entry. The second entry is pertaining to the aircraft. So when there is an increase in the asset of the company, it will be recorded as a debit entry of $20,000. Then we have to make a slight indentation for our credit entry because we know that the level of cash in the company was decreased. Therefore, we have recorded a credit entry of 40,000. And then there was an increase in the liability of the company because this amount will have to be paid out by the company in future to the utility aircraft company. So this is basically our liability, and when there is an increase in the liability of the company, it will be recorded as a credit entry. Finally, the last step is to give a short narration or explanation that what has actually happened in the above transaction. So you have to close down this narration between the brackets and write down purchase crop dusting aircraft. So rest of the explanation is already been explained with the help of the account titles, and as well as the amounts are also available into the relevant columns. So for the next entry, let's move towards the question. Now we have to journalize the June 4 transaction. Paid Woodrow Airport $2,500 to rent office and hangar space for the month. Now we have paid down the Woodrow Airport $2,500 as the rent expense. So the expense of the company has been increased, and definitely this payment is in the form of cash. So the cash level will be decreased. So let's select the relevant account title from your chart of account. The level of cash will decrease because we have paid out $2,500 to the Woodrow Airport, and this is our rent expense for the use of airport. So the expense of the company has been increased. So when there is increase in the expense, it is recorded as a debit entry, and when there is a decrease in the asset, it is recorded as a credit entry. So let's see how to record this entry. Here we have the June 4th entry. The rent has been increased, so therefore we have to mention the debit entry first, and then the cash level has also decreased because we have paid down $2,500 to the Woodrow Airport. So therefore it will have a credit entry. Finally, we have to give a short narration, that is to pay that we have paid down the rent for the month of June to the Woodrow Airport. So dear student, you have to select the shortest possible and concise narration after writing down the relevant account titles. Now let's move towards our next journal entry in this question, which is pertinent to the June 15. On June 15, the company has billed customer $8,320 for the crop dusting services. The company might have rendered the services to its customer, and they have sent a bill to the customer in the amount of $8,320 for the services rendered during first half of June. As we know that company has only sent the bill, however, they have not received the amount against the services what they have rendered. So therefore this amount is our receivable until the customer paid out this obligation. And as we know that the revenue realization principle states that when the services have been rendered down to the customers or to the clients rather, then our revenue has been realized and earned. So therefore we have to record this journal entry into the journal. So let's move ahead. Here we have June 15 transaction. Our account receivable has been increased because we have not received cash from the clients. Rather, we have just billed them to pay out this obligation to our company for the services we have rendered. When there is increase in the asset, it is recorded as a debit entry. And since we have rendered our services, so the amount we have earned is actually the revenue of the company. And when there is increase in the revenue of the company, Raymond's rule states that we have to record a credit into the revenue section. So as we have done the same, and the final step is to write down the short narration, that is to build customer for the first half of June. Let's move back to our question. For the next transaction, once again on June 15, we have another transaction that paid out $5,880 in salaries to the employees for the services rendered during first half of June. So the salaries paid down by our company to the employee is basically our expense. So it's our salaries expense. We can counter check from the chart of account, or you can check out later on in the chart of account. I will discuss the transaction into the journal now. So basically the sentence states that we have paid down, so definitely the payment is in the form of cash. So the cash level of the company will decrease and the salaries expense of the company will increase. How to record this entry? Let's move ahead towards the solution. The June 15 transaction states that salaries expense has been increased. So when there is increase in the expense, it is recorded as a debit entry. And since the payment of this salary is in the form of cash, so therefore there will be a decrease in the amount of cash of the company. Therefore, whenever there is a decrease in the cash level of the company, it is recorded as a credit entry. So because of the space limitation, here I have omitted the account titles mentioned as a debit entry and a credit entry. So basically this question is in continuity to the previous slide. Finally, we have to make a short narration that we have paid down salaries for the first half. Let's move back to our next transaction of June 18. So on June 18, paid the Hannigan's hangar $1,890 for the maintenance and repair services. So our company has obtained repair and maintenance services from the Hannigan's and Hangar company. So our company's repair and maintenance expense has been increased, and on the other hand side we have paid down this $1,890 in the form of cash. So therefore the level of cash will decrease. The relevant title for the cash is same as mentioned in the form of cash, so cash level decrease, and on the other hand side the maintenance expense will go up. So let's see how to record this entry. In June 18, the maintenance expense has been increased, and increase in expense recorded as a debit entry, and then slight indentation for the credit entry. There was a decrease in the cash levels, therefore it was having a credit entry. And then finally we have to give a short narration that we have paid down maintenance and repair expenses charges. Let me remove and discuss the next transaction. Let's go back to the instruction. We have the June 30th transaction, rather June 25. On June 25, we have collected, the company has collected $4,910. So definitely in this case, the company's cash level will go up because we have collected this amount against what we have billed to the customer on June 15. As we have billed the customer on June 15, so out of $8,320, the customer has paid us $4,910. So therefore the level of cash will increase, and the account receivable what was generated against those customer will decrease. So let's see how to record this entry. On June 25, the cash level has increased because the client has paid us $4,910. So when there is increase in the asset, it has been recorded as a debit entry. And on the other hand side, the account receivable against those clients has reduced. So when the account receivable will be collected in the form of cash, those account receivable will decrease. And when there is decrease in the asset title or asset account of the company, it is recorded as a credit entry. So therefore, we have recorded the relevant credit entry against the debit entry. And finally, we have given a short narration as collected part of the bill of June 15. Let's move back to discuss the next transaction. We have of June 30th. Once again, we are going to bill the customer for the second half of the month. We have billed the customer and the amount is 16,450 for the crop dusting services rendered during the second half of the month. So therefore, once again, the entry will be synonyms to our carbon copy of June 15. However, the amount will be changed with 16,450. So therefore, I'll not explain in detail, rather move ahead. So you can see that once again on June 30th, the account receivable has been increased because we have billed the customer with 16,450 and the revenue has been increased. So when there is increase in revenue, it has been recorded as a credit entry. And narration states that billed customer for the services. So let's move towards the next June 30th entry. Here we have June 30th. In total, we have 4 entries against June 30th. On June 30th, we have paid down the salaries to the customer, not to the customer, rather to the employees of the company. And it is once again carbon copy of the entry of June 15. So therefore, once again, we can simply pick up the relevant titles as we have recorded in June 15 and only to change the relevant numerical value for that, which is now $6,000. Let's see how to do that. Here we have recorded increase in expense by 6,000 as a debit entry and decrease in cash as a credit entry with $6,000. Let's move back once again to discuss the next June 30th entry. And it states that we have received a fuel bill. This is something, a new entry. We have received, our company has received a fuel bill from Henry Freight and Fuel Company for $2,510 of aircraft fuel purchased during the June. This amount is due by July 10. So we have received a bill against the fuel we have used, but we are not expected to pay down immediately. Rather, we are required to pay out this amount in the next month by July 10. However, we have utilized and used the fuel, so therefore the fuel expense of the company has gone up. It will be having a debit entry. And as we have to pay out by the next month's 10th of next month, so therefore it is our liability named as account payable and our liability has been increased. So increase in fuel expense, a debit entry, increase in account payable, a credit entry. We have done the same, increase in fuel expense by 2,510 and increase in accounts payable with a credit entry, and has given us a short narration with the title received bill for the fuel of June. So let's discuss our last entry of this journal section. The last entry states that the Campbell, who is the owner of the business, withdrew $2,000 cash from the business for personal use. So at the start of the business, Pat Campbell has deposited $60,000, but now at the end of the month on June 30th, the owner is requiring $2,000 for the personal use. So therefore, he has withdrawn $2,000 from the company. Therefore, the level of cash in the company will decrease by $2,000. Therefore, it will have a credit entry because there is a decrease in the cash, which is the asset account. On the other hand side, we have a Pat Campbell drawing account. So when there is drawing in the company, it will have a debit entry because this title basically decreased the owner equity. So when there is decrease in the owner equity, it is recorded as a debit entry. So let's move to the solution section. Here we have the final June 30th transaction. The Pat Campbell drawing has been increased, which reduced your owner's equity. Therefore, we have a debit entry. And the cash level in the company has also decreased. So there is a decrease in the cash. So it will have a credit entry. The short narration states that owner has withdrawn the cash from the business organization. So dear student, basically this is the first step to journalize the entries in the proper format of journal. So after the completion, in order to counter check, you can draw a line over the last two columns and simply can add up both sides to counter check that either you have given the corresponding debit and credit entry in your each and every transaction or not. So for the next two steps, which is to journalize, which is to post these journal entries to the next step of ledger account, will be discussed in my next lecture, and as well as the trial balance will be discussed in the subsequent lecture. Thank you very much for listening to this lecture. If you have any confusion for recording the debit and credit entries, you are free to ask your question on KCMS, or another way around, you can also email me with your queries on my email address as mentioned in the footer of this lecture. Good luck for the day. Allah Hafiz.